There's a company that just quietly crossed $300 million in annual revenue and became cash flow positive, and I bet you've never heard of it. It's not building chatbots, it's not training foundation models, it doesn't have a flashy demo video. It does payroll. Literally the most boring category in software. And yet, according to its own CEO, it just grew revenue per employee by 50% without adding a single new hire. On his second monitor, right now, he says he has 5 different AI agents running at once, building things for the company while he works. Stick with me, because by the end of this video you're going to understand exactly how a payroll company is quietly beating companies 10 times more famous at the one metric that actually matters in the AI era, how much revenue a single human being can produce. And more importantly, why the boring businesses might be the ones with the clearest playbook for the rest of us. The company is called Remote. It's based in Amsterdam, it's 7 years old, and its core business is helping companies employ people legally in other countries, handling payroll, taxes, contracts, and compliance across dozens of jurisdictions. If you've ever tried to hire someone in a country where your company has no legal entity, you know how messy that gets, different tax codes, different labor laws, different filing deadlines in different languages. That's the entire business. In late May 2026, Remote announced it had surpassed $300 million in annual recurring revenue and, maybe more importantly for a venture-backed company, become cash flow positive. Normally that's the kind of milestone that gets a press release and a few trade publication mentions and nothing else. But CEO Job van der Voort told TechCrunch that the ARR number wasn't actually the interesting part. The interesting part was what happened inside the company to get there, a 50% jump in revenue generated per employee, driven almost entirely by how deeply they'd pushed AI into every department, not just engineering. Here's where it gets specific. Van der Voort described having 5 separate Claude instances open at once, some doing his own work, some building internal tools for the rest of the company, including a Slack agent that automatically summarizes internal discussions. But the bigger shift wasn't the CEO's own workflow, it was that employees across every function, not just engineers, started building their own small AI-powered tools inside something called Remote Labs, an internal app marketplace built on Remote's own technology. Instead of AI adoption being a top-down engineering initiative announced in an all-hands meeting and then quietly ignored, it became something closer to every department quietly automating its own repetitive work, payroll edge cases, compliance checks across different countries, the bureaucratic grind that comes with paying people correctly in 40-plus jurisdictions, each with its own rules about benefits, taxes, and termination law. That's usually the kind of work that requires a specialist and a lot of manual cross-checking, and it's exactly the kind of repetitive, rules-based process that AI agents turn out to be good at. Then Remote did something a lot of companies miss, it turned its own internal AI workflow into a product it could sell. It's called Remote Build, and it's essentially a team of what investors like to call forward-deployed engineers, people who sit directly with Remote's customers and prospects and build the same kind of custom AI workflows for them that Remote built for itself internally. In other words, the company didn't just get more efficient, it packaged its own efficiency playbook and started charging for it. That's a meaningfully different move than most companies make, because most companies treat internal AI tooling as a cost center, something the ops team quietly benefits from with nobody outside the building ever hearing about it. Remote treated it as a second revenue line hiding inside its own operations team, and it's betting that other companies would rather pay someone who's already solved this problem than rebuild it themselves from scratch. On the engineering side specifically, the numbers get a little uncomfortable if you're a software developer watching this. Van der Voort says code contributions from Remote's engineers rose more than 60% over the past year, and that as of now, more than 85% of all the code written at the company is written by AI, not humans. Now, to be clear, these are self-reported figures from the company itself, not independently audited, so take the precise percentages with a grain of salt. But directionally, this matches what other companies, like Spotify, have said publicly about their own engineering teams recently. And critically, Van der Voort says this hasn't led to layoffs. What it has led to is Remote quietly scaling back how aggressively it hires, choosing instead to ask whether existing employees, upskilled with AI tools, can absorb the extra work instead of adding headcount. In his own words, some departments had plans to hire more people than they ended up hiring, not because of budget cuts, but because the AI tooling simply closed the gap first. The most forward-looking piece of this story is something called Remote MCP, a technical interface built on the Model Context Protocol, the emerging standard that lets AI agents securely talk to external software. What it means in practice is that platforms like Bamboo HR or Workday, or honestly just an AI agent like Claude or ChatGPT running on someone's laptop, can now directly access payroll and compliance data through remote, without a human ever opening the remote dashboard. Van der Voort put it bluntly, if you're using ChatGPT or Claude, you can control all of remote through it, you don't have to interact with the platform at all anymore. That's a strange thing for a software company's own CEO to say out loud, that the goal is for people to stop using the product's interface. But it's consistent with where he thinks the entire software industry is heading, agents doing the clicking, not people. He's even been testing this personally with his own open-source AI assistant, built with strict permission boundaries so it can look things up and take safe actions inside remote systems without being able to do anything destructive with sensitive financial and personal data. Now zoom out for a second, because the comparison here is genuinely useful. Some of the most talked about AI-native companies right now report extraordinary revenue per employee, coding tools reportedly generating tens of millions of dollars per person on tiny teams, AI image companies built with no outside funding at all reaching similar numbers on teams of just a few dozen people. Those are flashy, venture-fueled outliers in categories that are exploding overnight, where user growth itself is the story. What makes Remote's story different is that payroll and compliance is about as unglamorous and unhyped as enterprise software gets. There's no viral demo, no overnight user growth curve, no one is posting screenshots of it on social media. And it's still producing the same kind of efficiency gain. That suggests the revenue per employee story isn't just an artifact of a few AI-native unicorns riding a hype wave, it's a pattern that shows up even in the least exciting corner of the software industry, once a company actually restructures around AI instead of just bolting a chatbot onto an existing product and calling it innovation. So here's the thing that ties this whole story together. The lesson from Remote isn't that AI writes 85% of your code, or that you should run 5 chat windows at once, those are just symptoms. The actual lesson is that the companies pulling ahead right now aren't necessarily the ones building the most exciting AI products, they're the ones honest enough to look at their own boring internal processes and ask which of these can just not require a person anymore. Remote didn't reinvent payroll. It just refused to keep paying humans to do the parts of payroll that a well-directed AI agent can do just as well, freeing those same people up for the parts that actually need judgment. And when your competitors are still deciding whether to give employees AI tool access, still running pilot programs and committee reviews, that gap compounds fast, month over month, quarter over quarter. If you want more of these deep dives into the real numbers behind who's actually winning the AI economy, and not just who's making the most noise on a keynote stage, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of story we're going to keep digging into.